Greetings to my Christian illusionist and gospel magician friends. This is a history lesson. It's not meant to be controversial. I know some of my opinions are not opinions others hold, and I know there's been some disagreement about some of the things I will say. But my heart in this is truly to educate and to help things be better. I believe what I'm saying applies to all of us who use magic in ministry, whether or not you're involved with the Fellowship of Christian Magicians, because it is just an aspect of understanding culture that we need to have thought through. But this, of course, especially applies to the Fellowship of Christian Magicians because I love that organization and I want to see its ministry thrive. I'd like to think it can have a better ministry in the future than it's had in the past. And for that to occur, there has to be an understanding of identity. I feel like right now the FCM is experiencing an identity crisis. And the most important thing relating to that organization to move into the future is to decide who it really is, what it's really about, and what it most has to offer. So here's the history lesson. My first Fellowship of Christian Magicians convention was 1975. It truly changed my life. I made friends there that I have to this day. So many things at that convention were things that I ended up using in ministry. I obviously was a very young man. I was a young pastor when I went to that first convention. And we were pastoring a small church where my wife and I did everything. So the things we learned about balloons and about clowning and, of course, about magic and about puppets, we brought all those things back and used them in our church for years to come. We attended the FCM for 2 or 3 years in the mid-'70s. And then our family grew and our finances didn't. And so we couldn't attend again until the mid-'80s. By the late 80s, we were at the FCM convention pretty much all the time, and I would say we became fixtures on that scene. During the 80s in particular and the 90s, something happened that I don't think anyone in the FCM processed. And I know it took a long time for it even to settle into me as to what was going on. And that is, the world around the FCM changed. In the 70s, as far as I know, it was the only place to go to learn what we wanted to learn. If you were a Christian who wanted to do clowning, the FCM was the only place to really get what you needed. Even those involved in children's ministry. To find the creative presentations that existed in the FCM, I mean, you couldn't find them outside the FCM. So it was the place to go. Well, what happened? As the years went by, people who especially enjoyed puppets, began to realize that, they weren't magicians and they weren't clowns. Puppets was their thing. And then they discovered that there were some groups who were doing some things that were all puppets. The Fellowship of Christian Puppeteers began to become much stronger and offer some very good conferences. And then Liz and Dale Von Sagan, who are some of my dearest friends in the world. Dale, of course, is now with the Lord. But they are truly dear friends. With their one-way street puppetry, they began to hold conferences around the country and literally around the world. They developed their International Festival of Puppeteers, which was attended by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And all of a sudden, the people who used to go to the FCM to get their puppetry ideas were saying, well, here's another place I can go where the whole thing is puppets. And it's all what I'm interested in. And so that's a better investment of my time and money. There was a time, I would say, I think it's truly a fair thing to say that at least half, maybe more than half of the attendees at any FCM convention were puppeteers. All of a sudden, they weren't at the convention like they used to be because they had other conventions that suited them better. The same thing happened with clowns. Going back to the 70s, I'm sure there were other clown things going on, but not very many. None that caught my attention. But by the late 80s and early 90s, there were more clown conventions than anyone could keep up with. Clown conventions all over the country, all over the world, and even the major clown organizations like the World Clowns and the Clowns of America, they discovered that a lot of clowns were interested in ministry. And that, I believe, was really spawned by the FCM. But these clowns, they realized, well, all these people are doing so much in churches, so we need to have tracks for the clowns who do ministry. And so the major clown organizations and any clown convention of any sort offered something for ministry. So the clowns said, well, here's this thing which offers a little bit of everything for everybody, or here's a convention that's all people like me who do what I do. So the clowns began to drift away from the FCM to go to clown conventions. And then something that I never would have expected, balloonatics, those who do balloon modeling. For the longest time, the FCM was the place, the only place I knew, to find really fantastic ballooning. And then all of a sudden, conferences came into being for people who did balloons. And hundreds of people would go to these conferences totally devoted to ballooning. And so the people who used to go to the FCM because they mainly were interested in balloons and that was the only place to learn it, all of a sudden they had another place to go where that was totally devoted to their interest, and so that was their choice. And in all of this, nobody was unhappy with the FCM. They simply had to look at how much money they had to spend to travel, how much vacation time they had, and then draw the conclusion, well, this is a better place to invest my time and resources because it's more about who I am and what I do. But the biggest thing, and it took me a long time to realize this was what had happened, but the biggest thing was children's ministry. When I started with the FCM back in the early 1970s or mid-1970s, I didn't know of any other place to learn what the FCM had to teach. Well, a lot of other children pastors didn't either. And so people from all kinds of denominations, people in children's ministry, would come to the FCM because that was the place to get all these wonderful ideas and resources. By the late 80s, all of a sudden, children's ministries conferences were popping up like they never had before and becoming bigger and better than they'd ever been before. I was involved with several of them, and some of them not only were attended by hundreds, but I think some topped 1,000 in attendance. And all of a sudden, the people who used to go to the FCM as children's pastors, because it was the only place they could get what they want, discovered now, well, there's these conferences for me, for a children's pastor, and the whole thing is about who I am and what I do. And along with all the clever resources they have there, they also have the other things that children's pastors need to know. So the people who used to come to the FCM as children's pastors to benefit from all we offered, they started going these other places too. So to put it very simply, as time went by, those decades went by, all of a sudden we had specialization occurring. We had people all around the FCM saying, this is what we are. We're puppeteers, we're clowns, we're balloonatics, we're children's pastors. So we're having an event that's all us. Well, at the same time that was occurring, so the people who used to go to the FCM were going to these other places. The FCM in the mid to late 90s made the decision to diversify. So let me say this again. When everyone else was specializing, the FCM made the decision to diversify. Instead of being just a conference, especially about gospel magicians and magic and ministry, it decided to be the conference for all the creative arts. We offer something for everyone. Well, how well did that work? I think, first of all, just a matter of history shows it didn't work very well. Because now the FCM is just hardly a remnant of what it used to be. They used to have conferences attended by more than 1,000 people. Now they can hardly get 100 people there. So this idea of becoming all things to all people didn't work. And again, I'm not saying that to be critical. That's just history. The facts back that up. It didn't work. But the other thing is it created a real problem for the FCM because when you were offering these different tracks, for example, quite a while they would say we've got 40 lectures in a week. We've got 8 different tracks, 5 lectures a day or whatever it was. Well, when you have that, then you need instructors for these 40 sessions. You can't afford to pay all these instructors. You can barely compensate them at all. So they have to come on their own dime, or else they have to be dealers who are mainly there to use their teaching sessions as an opportunity to sell. But fundamentally, you end up with volunteers. And when you rely on volunteers, you can get some good help. Thank the Lord for FCM members who are some of the best in all the world that have shared their time again and again. But there are also situations where you kind of have to take what you get. So the quality becomes uneven in the teaching sessions. And then it became a financial challenge for the FCM, because to have 8 lectures going on at the same time requires 8 different rooms. It requires a big facility. So at the same time that people are drifting away from the organization to go to these other conventions, so their numbers are starting to diminish, at the same time, the FCM has this huge financial obligation when it puts on its conference, because it has so many rooms and so many different things going on for all the different activities. And so it truly became a challenge to find a facility. I mean, you've got less people coming, which is less income, and yet you've still got this bigger thing that you're trying to do. Well, I don't think I need to go on and on explaining that, but it simply created a real problem. And that is, as financial challenges came along, there had to be a reduction in some of the things they offered. They couldn't always bring in the quality of teachers they wanted to. And so those who were specializing became even more attractive. Because here's a place, the FCM, that's doing a lot of things, and some of the stuff they do really great, and some of it's so-so, kind of uneven. But here's another place where the whole week is devoted to what I really care about. So we need to put a conclusion on this. In other words, basically I'm offering you a history lesson, but I don't want to just recite the history. I want us to consider, what it means. And I think it means several things. First of all, that what I've just said needs to be considered, and the organization needs to contemplate, well, just how well is it working to try to be all things to all people? And if it decides it wants to continue to be that, it can, and I won't stand in the way of it. I love the people in the FCM. I'll support them every way I can. But if it makes that decision to continue to try to be, this thing for all the different arts, then it has to face the fact that there will be consequences. And have to say to themselves that, well, that's okay. We'll just accept these consequences. One of the consequences will be those who really care about doing things especially well will continue to go to the places that specialize. So they're going to have a tough time getting very many people to their conferences. It's just a matter of choice. I know a lot of younger gospel magicians and Christian illusionists, and I've talked to them. I won't tell you their names because I don't want them to be criticized. But they say, Dwayne, I love the FCM. I love the people in it, but I'm not going to go there because it's almost a whole week. It costs a lot to go there, and I can learn so much better at Magic Live or Magi Fest, some other place. And sure, those other conferences aren't about ministry, but there's Christian magicians there that I meet, and I know the Lord, I know the gospel, I know the Word, so I can create my own applications, and I can learn the magic the way I want to learn in these other places. That's what they're doing. That's where they are. They aren't with the FCM anymore. So what I'm saying is, if the FCM wants to continue to be all things to all people, it can do that. And I will continue to love the organization. But it needs to face the fact that the numbers are not going to be big. They're going to have a tough time attracting a crowd. And the other thing I think that needs to be faced is that sooner or later, a new organization will be formed that specializes in magic in ministry. I am not going to be the one to do it. Please don't misunderstand this. I am too old, and I simply am not wired to be somebody who organizes a thing like that. So I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I am not going to do it. But I think eventually somebody will. And when it happens, the FCM needs to be prepared not to take any offense, because the clowns did it, the jugglers did it, the balloon people did it, the children's pastor did it, and now magicians are going to do it. Because gospel magicians want something that's special for them. That's just going to occur. And the other thing that I would say is the big issue is serious thinking has to be done about the matter of excellence. For in these modern times, when there is so much that's on video and so much that we can be compared with, it's especially important that what we do is done well. If we are ridiculous, believe me, the whole world's going to see it. It'll go viral. People are going to, and beyond that, people simply look to see what we're doing, decide do they want to be a part of it or not. And if it's done extremely well, that's attractive. If it's not done extremely well, it's not attractive. So the organization needs to do some serious thinking about, okay, even if we are trying to be this jack of all trades, somehow, in all these different things we do, we really have to up the quality of the teaching. We can't, the old saying, jack of all trades, master of none, and I know there's different ways that is said, but most people want to master their particular interest. There are some who are general practitioners and they can do a little bit of everything, and they just love the fact, and they're great people to be around because they know a little bit about everything. So they're really fun and they're very clever. However, when you decide you want to learn something, typically you go to the person who's the expert. When it's time for you to learn about a particular thing, you don't want to learn from somebody who dabbles in it, who has kind of a mid-range knowledge of it. If that's what they have, you'll learn from them because it's better than what you know. But what I'm saying is, when you have a choice, you're going to look for the people who are the experts. So somehow, excellence needs to be given more attention. Well, I'm sort of rambling, so I'm not going to go any farther than this. But my biggest concern was to simply help us understand how the world has changed for those who do magic in ministry. There was a time when there was kind of one big attraction where all these different things fit in because there was nothing else. There was no other place to go. Now there's a lot of places to go. Now there's a lot of choices. And so we have to seriously think about how we attract attention to what we are in particular. And whatever we do, we need to do exceptionally well. Well, I wish I had better answers. I wish I had profound solutions. But I wanted to put this on record so those who are just getting started in magic and ministry and the future generation can at least have a sense of how the world changed during this stage of the FCM, how the world went to specialization at the same time that the FCM became kind of diverse. Diverse in the sense of trying to be all things to all the different groups. That's all I have to say for now. I'm sure I'll talk more about this subject in the future.